Zuri Afalayan, you are my benefactor, you saved my family, and I've never forgotten. The groom's voice trembles as he kneels before a stunned librarian in a glittering Chicago ballroom, his words shattering the elegance of his own wedding. Zuri, a woman of quiet grace, hides a past that could outshine the elite around her, yet she's faced their scorn for being different. This is a story of kindness that defies prejudice, of a love tested by lies, and a truth that builds something eternal. Every moment grips you, and the ending will steal your breath. Subscribe now to catch every twist and tell us where you're watching from, day or night. Rate this story in the comments from 1 to 10, and stay to see how one act of compassion reshapes everything. The air in the little Chicago bookstore carried the scent of aged paper and fresh ink, a sanctuary where Zuri Afalayan could lose herself in the quiet rhythm of her work. At 27, she was a vision of understated elegance, her long, glossy black hair cascading down her back, her warm brown skin glowing softly under the shop's amber lights. Her eyes, sharp and kind, flickered with a wisdom that belied her simple role as a librarian. Zuri's life was a deliberate choice, a modest apartment, a wardrobe of thrifted dresses, a job shelving books. But beneath this carefully crafted facade lay a truth she guarded fiercely. She was the sole heir to Afalayan Enterprises, a tech empire that could buy half the city. She hid it all, not for shame, but for freedom, to be seen for who she was, not what she owned. Yet being the only black woman in many of the spaces she moved through meant she was never truly invisible. The weight of stares, the sting of whispered judgments, they followed her like shadows. Zuri adjusted a stack of history books, her fingers brushing the worn spines, when the bell above the door chimed. She glanced up, expecting another regular, but instead saw a man who seemed to step out of a different world. Elias Whitaker, 30, strode in with an easy confidence, his tailored blazer slightly rumpled, as if he'd just come from a lecture hall. His sandy hair caught the light, and his green eyes sparkled with a curiosity that made Zuri pause. He was handsome, yes, but it was his warmth that struck her, a smile that seemed to invite the world in. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I'm looking for a first edition of the History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Do you carry anything like that?" Zuri's lips curved into a smile, her heart quickening at the challenge. "Gibbon's masterpiece? You're in luck. We have a copy in the rare books section, but it's a bit dusty. Follow me." She led him through the narrow aisles, their footsteps muffled by the threadbare carpet. As they walked, Elias asked about her favorite books, and Zuri found herself talking easily, about Austen's wit, Baldwin's fire, the way a good story could make the world feel less heavy. Elias listened, really listened, his eyes never leaving hers, and for a moment, Zuri forgot the wall she'd built around her heart. They reached the rare books case, and Zuri pulled out the leather-bound volume, its pages yellowed but intact. "Here it is," she said, handing it to him. Their fingers brushed, and a spark of something unspoken passed between them. Elias grinned, flipping through the book. "You're a lifesaver. I'm a history professor at the university, and my students would riot if I didn't bring this to class tomorrow." Zuri laughed, a sound that felt lighter than she'd expected. "Well, we can't have a riot on our hands. I'm Zuri, by the way." "Elias," he replied, extending a hand. His grip was firm, warm, and lingered just a moment too long. "I'll be back for more than just books, Zuri." The promise in his voice sent a flutter through her chest, but she pushed it down. She'd learned long ago that trust was a luxury she couldn't always afford. As Elias left with the book, the bell chimed again, and the air shifted, growing colder. Lenora Whitaker entered, her silver hair pinned in a flawless chignon, her designer coat screaming old money. Zuri recognized her type immediately, the kind of woman who measured worth in bank accounts and bloodlines. Lenora's ice blue eyes scanned the shop, landing on Zuri with a look that carried centuries of disdain. "You there?" Lenora said, her voice sharp as cut glass. "Fetch me that poetry collection in the window, the Dickinson one." Zuri nodded, moving to retrieve the book. But as she reached for it, her elbow brushed a display, sending a single paperback tumbling to the floor. Before she could pick it up, Lenora's voice sliced through the quiet. "Careless, aren't you? I suppose I shouldn't expect better from someone like you." The words hung heavy, laced with a venom that Zuri knew all too well. Her skin, her presence, her very existence in this space. It was always too much for some. She straightened, her jaw tight, and handed Lenora the book. "Here you are, ma'am." Lenora snatched it, her lips curling. "You don't belong in a place like this, girl. Stick to something simpler." The insult landed like a slap, but Zuri's face remained a mask of calm. She'd faced worse, far worse, and she'd learned to let the hate roll off her like rain. But inside, her heart pounded, a mix of anger and exhaustion. Lenora turned to leave, then paused, her eyes narrowing. "You're not fooling anyone, you know. Stay away from my son." Zuri froze. Son? Elias. The connection hit her like a freight train. Lenora was Elias's mother. The realization twisted in her gut, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't know what you mean, ma'am." Lenora's smile was cold, predatory. "Oh, you will. I'll make sure of it." She swept out, leaving the air thick with her threat. Zuri stood alone, the bookstore's warmth now stifling. She clutched the counter, her mind racing. Elias had been kind, genuine, but Lenora's words were a warning, a promise of trouble she knew too well. Growing up as the only black girl in elite circles, she'd endured countless slights, each one a reminder that her wealth couldn't shield her from prejudice. She'd built her simple life to escape that world, to find people who saw her heart, not her skin or her fortune. But now, with Elias's warmth lingering in her mind and Lenora's threat echoing in her ears, Zuri felt the walls of her carefully constructed world begin to crack. She locked up the shop that evening, stepping into the Chicago night. The city's lights glittered, but they couldn't chase away the unease settling in her chest. Elias was different, wasn't he? His kindness, his curiosity, they felt real. But Lenora's hatred was real too, and Zuri knew better than to underestimate a woman like that. As she walked home, her hair swaying in the breeze, Zuri made a silent vow. She'd protect her heart, her truth, and the life she'd chosen. But something told her that Elias Whitaker and his mother would test that vow in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The Chicago skyline shimmered through the cafe window, a mosaic of steel and glass that Zuri Afolayan barely noticed as she sat across from Elias Whitaker. 6 months had passed since their first meeting in the bookstore, and their connection had deepened into something Zuri hadn't dared hope for. Elias, with his tousled sandy hair and earnest green eyes, had a way of making her feel seen. Not as the heiress of Afolayan Enterprises, but as Zuri, the woman who loved dog-eared novels and quiet evenings. At 30, he carried the easy charm of a history professor, his stories of ancient empires laced with a humor that made Zuri laugh until her sides ached. Tonight, though, his usual warmth was tinged with nerves as he fidgeted with his coffee cup, his fingers tracing its rim. "Zuri," he began, his voice softer than usual, "there's something I've been meaning to ask." Her heart skipped, a flicker of anticipation mixing with dread. She adjusted her posture, her long black hair spilling over one shoulder, and met his gaze. "Go on," she said, her tone light but her pulse quickening. Elias took a breath, his eyes searching hers. "My sister Talia is getting married soon. It's going to be a big deal. Fancy venue, all the Chicago elite. I know it's not your scene, but would you come with me? As my date?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Zuri's mind flashed to Lenora Whitaker, Elias's mother, whose venomous words still stung from their encounter at the bookstore. Lenora's icy stare, her thinly veiled threat to make sure Zuri stayed away, lingered like a bruise. Zuri knew the world of the Whitakers, glittering, exclusive, and unforgiving to someone like her, a black woman who didn't wear her wealth like a badge. But Elias's hopeful expression, the way his hand reached for hers, melted her resolve. "I'd love to," she said, forcing a smile. His face lit up, relief flooding his features. "You're sure? It can be intense. My family, they're a lot." Zuri squeezed his hand. "I can handle it." If only she believed her own words. The pre-wedding reception was held at a rooftop venue overlooking Lake Michigan, its opulence a stark contrast to Zuri's modest life. She wore a simple navy dress, elegant but unassuming, chosen to blend rather than stand out. Her hair fell in sleek waves and she kept her makeup minimal, a shield of simplicity against the scrutiny she knew awaited. As she and Elias stepped into the glittering crowd, the air buzzed with clinking glasses and practiced laughter. Zuri recognized the faces, old money families, tech moguls, the kind of people who'd attended her family's galas when she was a child playing the role of the perfect heiress. Now she was just Elias's date, the librarian, and the whispers began the moment she entered. "Is that Elias's girlfriend?" A woman in a sequined gown murmured, her voice carrying, "She looks ordinary." Another voice, sharper, chimed in. "A bookstore clerk? Really, Elias?" Zuri's jaw tightened, but she kept her head high. Her arm looped through Elias's. He seemed oblivious to the stares, chatting animatedly with a cousin about Talia's wedding plans. But Zuri felt every glance, every whispered judgment, like pinpricks on her skin. She'd faced this before. Rooms where her presence was a question mark, her blackness a silent accusation. She'd learned to armor herself with grace, but it never stopped hurting. Then Lenora Whitaker appeared, a vision in emerald silk, her silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. Her eyes locked onto Zuri, and the room seemed to shrink. "Elias, darling," she said, air-kissing her son, her smile never reaching her eyes. She turned to Zuri, her gaze slicing through her. "And Zuri, is it? How quaint to see you here." The word quaint dripped with condescension, and Zuri felt the crowd's attention sharpen. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Whitaker," Zuri replied, her voice steady. Lenora's lips twitched. "Oh, don't thank me yet. These events can be overwhelming for someone of your background." Elias frowned, his arm tensing around Zuri's. "Mother, that's enough." But Lenora pressed on, her voice loud enough to draw eyes. "I'm only saying, dear, not everyone is cut out for this world. You work at a bookstore, don't you, Zuri? How charmingly simple." The crowd tittered, and Zuri's cheeks burned, not with shame but with a quiet fury. She could have revealed her truth right then, that she could buy this venue twice over, but that would mean surrendering the life she'd chosen. Instead, she smiled, her eyes locking with Lenora's. "I find joy in simple things, Mrs. Whitaker. Not everyone needs extravagance to feel fulfilled." The jab landed, and Lenora's smile faltered, but only for a moment. She leaned closer, her voice a venomous whisper. "Enjoy your little moment, girl. But if you think you belong with my son, you're mistaken. I'll make sure you lose more than your pride if you don't walk away." Before Zuri could respond, Talia, the bride-to-be, swept over, her blonde curls bouncing. "Elias, you made it!" She hugged her brother, then turned to Zuri, her smile polite but guarded. "You must be Zuri. I've heard a lot." The hesitation in her voice stung, but Zuri nodded. "Congratulations, Talia. I'm happy to be here." As Talia was whisked away by her bridesmaids, Elias pulled Zuri aside, his face clouded with concern. "I'm sorry about my mother. She's protective, but that was out of line." Zuri shook her head, forcing a lightness she didn't feel. "It's fine, Elias. I've dealt with worse." But it wasn't fine. Lenora's threat echoed in her mind, a promise of something darker to come. She glanced across the room, where Lenora now held court, her laughter ringing false. Zuri knew this woman would stop at nothing to tear her from Elias, to prove she didn't belong. As the evening wore on, Zuri stayed by Elias's side, his warmth a lifeline in the sea of judgment. But the weight of Lenora's words pressed against her chest, a reminder of the battles she'd fought to carve out her quiet life. She'd hidden her wealth to escape this world, to find someone who saw her heart. Elias did, didn't he? But as she caught Lenora's cold stare across the room, Zuri realized this was only the beginning. The wedding was days away, and Lenora Whitaker was a storm waiting to break. Zuri Afalayan stood behind the counter of the Chicago bookstore, her fingers tracing the edges of a worn copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God. The familiar scent of paper and dust usually grounded her, but today it did little to quiet the storm in her chest. The memory of Lenora Whitaker's venomous words at the pre-wedding reception clung to her like damp fog. "I'll make sure you lose more than your pride," Lenora had hissed, her icy stare a blade aimed at Zuri's heart. At 27, Zuri had faced prejudice before, whispers, slights, doors slammed shut because of her blackness, but Lenora's threat felt different, personal, a promise carved in malice. Her long, glossy black hair fell over her shoulder as she leaned against the counter, trying to focus on the quiet rhythm of her work. But her thoughts kept drifting to Elias Whitaker, the one bright spot in this mess, his green eyes and warm laugh a balm to her wounds. Yet even that comfort was tinged with fear. How long could she keep her truth hidden? That she was the heiress to Aphelion Enterprises, a fortune that dwarfed the Whitakers' wealth. Elias had been her anchor these past 6 months, his kindness a lighthouse in the choppy waters of her life. As a history professor, he saw the world through stories of struggle and triumph, and he saw Zuri not as a symbol, but as a woman, sharp, kind, real. But Lenora's warning loomed, and Zuri knew the wedding of Elias's sister Talia would be a battlefield. She'd agreed to go, to stand by Elias, but the cost of that choice was growing clearer. Her simple navy dress hung in her closet, a shield of modesty, but no fabric could protect her from the judgment of Chicago's elite. The bookstore's bell chimed, pulling Zuri from her thoughts. Elias entered, his blazer slightly askew, a stack of papers tucked under his arm. His smile was softer today, shadowed by something unspoken. "Hey," he said, setting the papers down. "Thought I'd drop by before my next lecture. You okay?" Zuri forced a smile, her heart aching at his concern. "Just a long day," she lied, shelving a book to avoid his gaze. Elias stepped closer, his voice low. "I know my mother was awful at the reception. I talked to her, told her to back off. She doesn't get to treat you like that." Zuri's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him everything, about her family's empire, the life she'd rejected. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she nodded. "Thanks, Elias. I'll be fine." Their moment was interrupted by the bell again. A man stepped inside, his tailored suit and confident stride marking him as out of place in the cozy shop. Zuri's breath caught. Malik Jordan. She hadn't seen him in years, not since she was 12, a wide-eyed girl trailing her father to charity meetings. Malik, now 32, was the groom-to-be, Talia's fiancé, a self-made businessman whose success was the talk of the city. His dark eyes lit up when he saw her. "Zuri? Zuri Aphelion? Is that really you?" His voice was warm, disbelieving, and Zuri's stomach twisted. She'd hoped to stay invisible, but Malik's recognition was a crack in her carefully built facade. "Malik," she said, forcing calm. "It's been a while." Elias looked between them, curious. "You two know each other?" Malik grinned, oblivious to Zuri's unease. "Know her? This woman saved my family. I was a kid, 17, living in a rundown apartment on the south side. We were about to be evicted. My mom was working 2 jobs, barely scraping by. Then this girl, barely older than me, showed up with her dad. They paid our rent for a year, gave us a chance to breathe. I never forgot her name, Zuri Aphelion." The words hit like a thunderclap. Zuri's heart raced, her carefully guarded secret teetering on the edge of exposure. She remembered that day vividly, her father teaching her about their family's quiet philanthropy, how they helped without fanfare. She'd insisted on meeting Malik's family, moved by their struggle, and used her allowance to cover their rent through the Aphelion Fund. But she'd never expected to see him again, let alone here, days before his wedding to Elias's sister. Elias's brow furrowed, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Wait, Zuri, you paid their rent? How?" Zuri's mind scrambled for an answer, but before she could speak, the bell chimed once more. Lenora Whitaker swept in, her presence like a cold wind. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of Malik and Zuri, catching the tail end of their conversation. "What's this about rent?" she asked, her voice sharp, her gaze pinning Zuri like a specimen. Malik, unaware of the tension, continued. "Zuri's family. They're not just anybody. They've got means, Mrs. Whitaker. They changed my life." Lenora's smile was a blade, thin and dangerous. "How interesting," she said, her eyes never leaving Zuri. "A librarian with such influence. I wonder what else you're hiding." Zuri's pulse pounded, but she held her ground, her voice steady. "Just helping where I can, Mrs. Whitaker." Lenora's laugh was cold. Oh, I'm sure, but secrets have a way of coming out, don't they? She turned to Elias, her tone saccharine. Darling, you should be careful who you trust. Some people aren't what they seem. Elias's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Lenora glided out, her parting glance a promise of trouble. Malik, sensing the shift, apologized. I didn't mean to stir anything up, Zuri. I owe you everything. Zuri forced a smile. It's okay, Malik. I'm glad you're doing well. He left and Elias turned to her, his eyes searching. Zuri, what was that about? Your family. Are you keeping something from me? Her heart sank. She wanted to tell him, to lay bare the truth of her wealth, her heritage. But fear held her back. It was a long time ago, she said softly. Just something my family did. That night, alone in her apartment, Zuri found a letter slipped under her door. An anonymous note, the handwriting sharp and precise. You don't belong with him. Walk away or I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are. The words were a gut punch, and Zuri knew Lenora was behind it. The wedding was days away, and the seeds of doubt had been sown, not just in Elias, but in Zuri herself. Could she keep her truth hidden and still hold on to the man she was falling for? Or would Lenora's malice unravel everything she'd fought to protect? The Chicago wind cut through the streets, its bite mirroring the dread in Zuri Afolayan's chest. In the bookstore's back room, surrounded by unshelved novels, she gripped a worn copy of Beloved, her long black hair pulled into a tight bun. Lenora Whitaker's anonymous note, walk away or I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are. Burned in her mind, each word a needle under her skin. At 27, Zuri had endured prejudice as a black woman in elite spaces, but Lenora's malice was a calculated assault. Her secret, that she was the heiress to Afolayan Enterprises, a tech empire dwarfing the Whitakers' wealth, felt like a noose tightening with Talia's wedding approaching. Zuri had hidden her identity to protect her heart, to be loved as herself, not her fortune. Now Lenora was unraveling that life, and Zuri could feel the cracks spreading. Elias Whitaker, the history professor who'd captured her heart, was her anchor. His green eyes and warm laugh saw her as Zuri, not an heiress. But Malik Jordan's revelation, that Zuri's family had saved his from eviction 15 years ago, had sown doubt in Elias. His question, what else are you keeping from me? Lingered, heavy with hurt. Zuri loved him, loved his stories, his kindness, the way he held her hand on Chicago streets. But Lenora's threat and the looming wedding made her secret a ticking bomb. She wanted to confess, but fear of losing Elias, of becoming just another rich heiress in his eyes, held her back. The bookstore was quiet that afternoon, the heaters hummed the only sound. Zuri restocked a shelf when Lila, her coworker, approached, her face tense. Zuri, people are talking, Lila whispered. They're saying you're a con artist, using Elias to infiltrate his family circle. Zuri's heart sank. Who's saying this? She asked, though she knew. Lila hesitated. Customers? Neighbors? They claim you've got a shady past. Zuri's knuckles whitened on the shelf. Lenora's poison had spread, tainting the one place Zuri felt safe. That evening, Elias arrived at her apartment, holding a manila envelope, his face shadowed. Zuri, we need to talk, he said, his voice strained. He handed her the envelope. Inside were grainy photos of Zuri at a charity gala years ago, a young girl in a designer gown beside her father, the Afolayan patriarch. A typed note read, she's a liar with a criminal past after your family's money. Zuri's breath caught. The photos were real, the accusations lies, Lenora's handiwork. Elias's eyes searched hers. These pictures, you're at some elite event. This note says you've got a record, that you're playing me. I don't believe it, but what's going on? His voice cracked, torn between trust and doubt. Zuri's heart ached. She wanted to reveal her truth, but fear stopped her. I was a kid in those photos, she said, voice steady despite her trembling hands. My family did charity work. The rest is a lie. Elias nodded, but his gaze lingered on the photos, doubt taking root. Who would do this? He asked. Zuri met his eyes, her resolve hardening. Your mother. Elias flinched. She's protective. But this? It's too far. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched in his face. I'll confront her. This stops now. But Lenora was relentless. The next day, Zuri arrived at the bookstore to find a small crowd outside, their whispers sharp. She's a fraud, a woman muttered. Thinks she can fool the Whitakers. The rumors had infected the community Zuri loved. Lila pulled her aside, eyes wide. They're saying you've been arrested, that you're after Elias's inheritance. It's getting out of hand. Zuri's chest tightened, her sanctuary now a battlefield. She could reveal her wealth, silence the lies, but that would mean surrendering her chosen life. That night in her apartment, Zuri stared at the note, its words a taunt. Lenora's scheme was dismantling her world. She thought of Malik's gratitude, how it had exposed her to Lenora's scrutiny, and Elias's trust, now fragile. The wedding was 2 days away, and Zuri knew she couldn't keep running. She had to face Lenora, to protect her love for Elias. As her hair spilled over her shoulders, she felt the weight of her choice. Revealing her identity might stop the lies, but it could change everything. Her life, her love, her place in the world. The storm was coming, and Zuri had to decide whether to stand or be swept away. The grand ballroom of the Palmer house shimmered under crystal chandeliers, a dazzling cage of opulence that Zuri Athalion entered with a knot in her stomach. Her simple cream dress clung softly to her frame, chosen to blend into the sea of Chicago's elite. But her long black hair, cascading in sleek waves, and her warm brown skin marked her as an outsider in this gilded world. At 27, Zuri had mastered the art of invisibility, hiding her identity as the heiress of Athalion Enterprises to live as a librarian, free from the weight of wealth. But today, at the wedding of Talia Whitaker, sister of her beloved Elias, that facade felt like a crumbling shield. Lenora Whitaker's campaign of lies, rumors of Zuri's supposed criminal past, anonymous notes and venomous whispers, had turned her sanctuary into a battleground. The air buzzed with the chatter of the elite, their diamonds glinting, their eyes sharp with judgment. Zuri stood beside Elias, his tailored tuxedo accentuating his broad shoulders, his green eyes warm but shadowed with the doubt Lenora had sown. You okay? He whispered, his hand brushing hers. Zuri nodded, forcing a smile. Just nervous, she murmured, but her heart pounded with the weight of her secret. Malik Jordan's recognition at the bookstore, his gratitude for her family's help in saving his family from eviction 15 years ago, had cracked her carefully guarded truth. Lenora's latest move, spreading lies that Zuri was a fraud after Elias's money, had pushed her to the edge. She'd decided to reveal her identity today, to silence the whispers. But the thought of losing Elias's love, the only thing that saw her as just Zuri, twisted her gut. The ceremony began, the string quartet filling the room with delicate notes. Talia, radiant in a gown that shimmered like moonlight, walked down the aisle, her blonde curls perfect, her smile practiced. Malik Jordan, the groom, stood at the altar, his clean-cut features glowing with pride. Zuri recognized him from their bookstore encounter, his gratitude still echoing in her mind. The guests, Chicago's wealthiest, sat in rows ranked by status, their whispers about Zuri. The librarian, Elias's fling, cutting through the music. Lenora, resplendent in sapphire silk, sat in the front row, her icy gaze fixed on Zuri, a predator waiting for her moment. The minister's voice droned through vows of love and commitment, but Zuri's attention faltered, her thoughts on Lenora's schemes. Then during the ring exchange, Malik's eyes swept the crowd and locked onto hers. His expression shifted, shock, recognition, reverence. He froze, the ring in his hand forgotten, and the room fell silent. Talia's voice, sharp through the microphone, broke the pause. Malik? He blinked as if waking from a dream, but his gaze stayed on Zuri. I'm sorry, he said, his voice carrying across the hushed ballroom. I need to speak to someone. The crowd gasped as Malik stepped away from Talia, his polished shoes echoing as he walked down the aisle toward Zuri. Her heart thundered, her palms slick. Elias gripped her hand, his confusion palpable. Malik stopped before her, his eyes glistening. Zuri Afolayan, he said, loud enough for all to hear. I can't believe you're here. To the shock of the guests, he knelt, his voice thick with emotion. 15 years ago, you saved my family. We were about to lose everything. Our home, our hope. You, a girl barely older than me, made sure we kept our apartment. You gave me a chance to dream, to build this life. The ballroom erupted in murmurs, heads turning, eyes boring into Zuri. Talia's face flushed with fury, her gown rustling as she stormed down the aisle. Lenora stood, her composure cracking. This is absurd, she snapped, her voice slicing through the chaos. This woman is a liar, a fraud. Zuri's chest tightened, but Malik shook his head, rising to face Lenora. No, ma'am. With all due respect, Zuri is the reason I'm standing here. Her family's generosity, her kindness, changed everything. Zuri felt the weight of every stare, the room closing in. She could stay silent, let the lies fester, or claim her truth. She stood, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. It's true, she said, her words ringing clear. I'm Zuri Afolayan of Afolayan Enterprises. I've chosen to live simply, to work in a bookstore, because wealth doesn't define me. I helped Malik's family because it was right, not for recognition. The crowd's whispers grew to a roar. Afolayan, the tech empire. Lenora's face paled, then reddened. Impossible, she hissed. You're a nobody. Elias stepped forward, his hand still in Zuri's, his voice firm. She's not a nobody. She's the woman I love, and I don't care about her money or her name. His words pierced Zuri's heart, a lifeline amidst the chaos. She turned to him, her eyes pleading. I hid this because I wanted you to love me for me, not my family's fortune. Every man before you saw only the money. Elias's gaze softened, understanding dawning. I see you, Zuri. I always have. Talia's voice cut through, shrill with anger. You've ruined my wedding, she cried, tears streaking her makeup. Malik turned to her, guilt in his eyes. Talia, I'm sorry, but Zuri's the reason I could become the man you love. The guests buzzed, some whispering admiration, others scorn. Lenora pushed forward, her voice venomous. This changes nothing. You don't belong here. But Zuri met her gaze unflinching. I belong wherever I choose to be, Mrs. Whitaker, and I choose love over your hate. The room was a whirlwind of shock and whispers, but Zuri felt a strange calm. Her secret was out, her truth laid bare. Elias's hand in hers was an anchor, but the battle wasn't over. Lenora's fury, Talia's humiliation, and the crowd's judgment loomed. As the quartet resumed, uncertain, Zuri knew the wedding had changed everything. Not just for her, but for the fragile love she'd fought to protect. The Palmer House ballroom, still echoing with the shock of Zuri Afolayan's revelation, felt like a battlefield strewn with the wreckage of secrets. Zuri stood in the aftermath, her cream dress a stark contrast to the glittering crowd, her long black hair a cascade of defiance. At 27, she'd shed the weight of her hidden identity as the heiress of Afolayan Enterprises, but the cost was steep. Malik Jordan's public gratitude, thanking her for saving his family from eviction 15 years ago, had exposed her truth, upending Talia Whitaker's wedding and igniting Lenora Whitaker's fury. The whispers of Chicago's elite buzzed like hornets, their eyes dissecting Zuri, now no longer the librarian, but a titan of wealth. Elias Whitaker, her anchor, held her hand, his green eyes fierce with loyalty, but the hurt in them lingered. She'd kept her truth from him, and though he'd stood by her, the fracture between them ached. Zuri's heart pounded as she and Elias slipped into a quiet alcove, away from the crowd's clamor. The chandeliers cast fractured light across his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw. Zuri, he said, his voice low, why didn't you trust me? Her throat tightened, the question cutting deeper than Lenora's venom. I wanted to, she whispered, her eyes searching his. But every man I've known saw my family's money before they saw me. I needed you to love Zuri, not the heiress. Elias's gaze softened, but the hurt remained. I do love you, but you kept half your life from me. That's not nothing. Zuri nodded, tears prickling. I'm sorry, Elias. I was scared. Your mother, she made it clear I didn't belong. As if summoned, Lenora appeared, her sapphire silk gown a stark contrast to her ashen face. The crowd's whispers had turned against her, her lies about Zuri's criminal past exposed as petty malice. Chicago's elite, quick to sniff out weakness, now murmured about Lenora's cruelty, her prejudice laid bare. Zuri, she said, her voice dripping with false warmth, I owe you an apology. I misjudged you. The words were a performance, her eyes cold, calculating. Zuri's stomach churned. This was no remorse, only damage control. Mrs. Whitaker, she replied, her voice steady, your apology doesn't erase what you did. You tried to destroy me because of who I am, not what I have. Lenora's smile faltered, her facade cracking. I was protecting my son, she insisted, glancing at Elias. Surely you understand. Elias stepped forward, his voice sharp. You didn't protect me, Mother. You humiliated Zuri, spread lies because you couldn't stand her being black, being better than you. The words hung heavy, and Lenora flinched, her composure crumbling. The crowd nearby hushed, their eyes darting between mother and son. Zuri squeezed Elias's hand, grateful but weary. She'd won this round, but the victory felt hollow. Lenora retreated, her head high but her influence diminished, the elite already turning their backs. Talia approached next, her wedding gown wrinkled, her mascara-streaked face a map of humiliation. Zuri, she said, her voice trembling. You let Malik make a spectacle of my wedding. How could you? Zuri's heart ached. She hadn't meant to hurt Talia. I'm so sorry, she said softly. I didn't know Malik would recognize me. I never wanted this. Talia's eyes narrowed, but then softened, her anger giving way to exhaustion. He says you're the reason he's here, that you gave him a future. I don't know what to think. Zuri nodded, her voice gentle. I only wanted to help, Talia. I never meant to take anything from you. Talia hesitated, then turned away, her silence a fragile truce. In the days that followed, Zuri threw herself into a new project, a community library in the South Side, a dream she and Elias had shared during late-night talks. They worked side by side, hauling books and painting shelves, the physical labor a balm for their strained bond. Elias was quieter now, processing her secret, but his touch, his hand brushing hers as they stacked books, spoke of love unbroken. I'm trying to understand, he admitted one evening, the library's half-finished shelves around them. You chose this life, this work, over everything your family's money could buy. That's incredible. Zuri smiled, her heart lighter. It's not about the money, Elias. It's about meaning. This library, you, that's what matters. Lenora's influence waned, her name now synonymous with petty cruelty among the elite. She sent a letter to Zuri, offering a formal apology and a donation to the library, but Zuri saw it for what it was, a desperate bid to salvage her reputation. Let her keep her money, Zuri told Elias, tearing the letter in half. Kindness can't be bought. Elias nodded, a spark of admiration in his eyes. You're stronger than she'll ever be. Talia, too, began to soften. She visited the library one afternoon, her engagement ring glinting as she offered a tentative smile. I was wrong about you, she admitted. Malik told me everything. How you helped his family. No strings attached. I'm sorry I judged you. Zuri's throat tightened, but she smiled. Thank you, Talia. I hope we can start over. Talia nodded, a weight lifting between them. As the library took shape, Zuri felt a new confidence. Her secret was no longer a burden, but a badge of her choices. She and Elias stood together one evening, the shelves now lined with books, the space alive with possibility. No more secrets, Elias said, his hand cupping her face. We build this, us, together. Zuri nodded, her heart full. Deal. The storm of the wedding had passed, but Lenora's shadow lingered. Zuri knew the fight for her place, her love, wasn't over, but with Elias by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The South Side Library stood like a beacon in the Chicago dusk, its freshly painted walls glowing under the streetlights. Zuri Afolayan moved through its aisles, her long black hair swaying, her warm brown skin catching the soft light of the reading lamps. At 27, she'd shed the weight of her secret. She was no longer just the librarian, but Zuri Afolayan, heiress to Afolayan Enterprises, who'd chosen books over ballrooms, love over legacy. The library, her dream with Elias Whitaker, was now a reality, its shelves brimming with stories for a community she'd fought to serve. But the scars of the past months lingered. Lenora Whitaker's venomous campaign, the wedding where Malik Jordan's gratitude had exposed her truth, and the fragile trust she'd rebuilt with Elias. Tonight, the library's grand opening would mark a new chapter, but Zuri's heart still trembled with the fear that her choices might yet unravel her happiness. Elias, his sandy hair slightly tousled, adjusted a banner by the entrance, his green eyes bright with purpose. At 30, the history professor had become her partner in every sense. Through late nights painting walls, through the sting of his mother's lies, through the revelation of Zuri's wealth. Their love had weathered doubt, but it was stronger for it, rooted in the truth they now shared. "You ready for this?" he asked, his smile warm but searching, as if he could sense the undercurrent of her nerves. Zuri nodded, smoothing her simple navy dress. "As ready as I'll ever be," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. The library was more than a building. It was a testament to her belief that kindness could outshine prejudice, that love could defy wealth. The crowd gathered, a mix of South Side locals and a few curious elites, their chatter filling the air with anticipation. Zuri had organized the event to honor those her family's quiet philanthropy had touched, including Malik Jordan, now happily married to Talia Whitaker. Malik, whose gratitude at the wedding had upended her world, stood near the stage, his tailored suit a far cry from the desperate teenager Zuri had helped 15 years ago. She'd paid his family's rent through the FLUENTLY fund, giving him a chance to dream, and now he was a successful businessman, giving back to the community. Talia, her blonde curls soft under the lights, stood beside him, her earlier resentment replaced by a tentative warmth. "You've done something incredible here," she told Zuri, her voice sincere. "I was wrong about you." Zuri smiled, her heart lighter. "Thank you, Talia. It means a lot." The event began, and Zuri took the stage, her presence commanding despite her unassuming dress. "This library is for everyone," she said, her voice clear, carrying over the crowd. "It's a place where stories live, where dreams begin, where no one is turned away." She introduced Malik, who shared his story, how Zuri's kindness had saved his family from eviction, giving him the stability to pursue his dreams. The crowd applauded, their faces a mix of awe and admiration. Zuri felt a swell of pride, not for her wealth, but for the lives she'd touched, the legacy she'd chosen over the one she'd inherited. Then Elias stepped onto the stage, his presence steady, grounding. The crowd hushed as he took Zuri's hand, his eyes locking onto hers. "Zuri Afalayan," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me what it means to live with purpose. You could have had anything, mansions, private jets, but you chose this. You chose us." He dropped to one knee, pulling a simple ring from his pocket, its modest stone glinting under the lights. "I love you for who you are, not what you have. Will you marry me?" The crowd gasped, then erupted in cheers, but Zuri barely heard them. Her heart thundered, tears blurring her vision. Elias's proposal was no grand gesture for the elite. It was raw, real, a promise built on 6 months of shared dreams and hard-won trust. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, Elias." He slid the ring onto her finger, pulling her into a kiss as the crowd roared, their applause a wave of warmth. For the first time, Zuri felt truly seen. Not as an heiress, not as an outsider, but as a woman loved for her heart. Lenora Whitaker lingered at the crowd's edge, her sapphire gown a stark contrast to the community's vibrancy. Her influence had crumbled since the wedding, her prejudice exposed, but she'd begun attending charity events, a reluctant attempt to rebuild her reputation. She approached Zuri later, her voice stiff. "You've done well here," she said, gesturing to the library. "Perhaps I was mistaken." Zuri met her gaze unflinching. "Mistakes don't erase pain, Mrs. Whitaker, but I hope you learn from them." Lenora nodded, her face tight, and walked away, her presence a fading shadow. As the night wound down, Zuri and Elias stood outside the library, the city's lights twinkling around them. "No more secrets," Zuri said, her hand in his. Elias smiled, his thumb brushing her ring. And no more doubts. We build our future together. Books, love, all of it. Zuri laughed, the sound free and full. The community's cheers echoed in her heart, proof that kindness and love could triumph over hate. Malik and Talia, now united, waved from across the room, their own bond stronger for the truth. Zuri's legacy wasn't her family's wealth. It was this library, this love, this life she'd chosen. As she looked at Elias, the man who saw her soul, she knew she'd found her home, and no storm could take it away. As the library's lights dimmed and Zuri and Elias stood hand in hand, their story reminds us that true wealth lies in kindness, courage, and love that sees beyond the surface. What did their journey stir in you? Have you ever faced a moment where your truth changed everything, or felt the power of a single act of compassion? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your stories. Thank you for joining us in this tale of triumph over prejudice, and we can't wait to share more stories that inspire and uplift. See you next time.